time. So, welcome everyone. Today we have a pleasure to speak about a topic that is very important for us, identity of cooperatives. And today we have three personalities, I can say that. Professor Gustavo from University of São Paulo, Professor Dante Cracogna from Universidade Buenos Aires, and Professor Hagen from University of Finland. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure for us to stay with you here. So, identity of cooperatives, it's important as these cooperatives in Brazil start to grow and the members become has many heterogeneity. So it's important for us to understand better this topic because of this time. To develop more knowledge about it, so we invited, and we will do in the following way, Professor Gustavo, then Professor Dante, and then Professor Hagen. They will speak in this way. We kindly ask you that if you have some question, please put it in the chat that we will do the question in the end when the speakers finish their part. So first, I will invite Professor Gustavo. Please feel free. Welcome. Thank you for accept the invite.
My compliments, mis cumprimentos e meus cumprimentos aos com nossos compatriotas brasileiros. Eu vou fazer uma rápida fala em português, somente para agradecer muito sinceramente ao professor Davi e ao Observatório do Cooperativismo, a quem eu só tenho elogios, e eu falo Brasil afora do excelente trabalho que vocês desempenham, mas principalmente por uma oportunidade como essa, de estar aqui com os professores Hagen, Henrÿ e Dante Cracogna, porque eu tenho profunda admiração. Então, para mim, é muito mais um presente do que uma oportunidade, é um presente que o Observatório do Cooperativismo me deu. Eu vou pedir aos nossos compatriotas, e eu vejo que tem pessoas especializadíssimas, doutora Michele, Pedro Bertonha, João Terige, entre outros colegas, extremamente especializados. Eu vou pedir autorização e deferência para que eu possa falar em inglês, por conta de internacionalização e também em respeito aos nossos convidados. Mis cumprimentos ao professor Dante Cracogna. Eu tenho que dizer que é profunda a minha admiração por seu trabalho e por la doutrina que representa para todo o cooperativismo do mundo. Então, eu tenho que dizer, muchas gracias por la oportunidad de estarmos aquí juntos. I can say the same for Professor Hagen Henrÿ. It's a profound honor to be here with you, Professor, again. I think we were together, I don't know, in Guarujá or Brasilia, but we had this opportunity to somehow meet each other. And for me, it's a great honor to be with you, because both of these professors, due to their work, deserve to be honored. I can say that with all my heart. As in my case, it makes a lot more complicated, because I have just a humble participation, and I have to say to all our colleagues that I will read my paper because I don't want to make so many mistakes. So just sorry for that. But let's go to the point. I want to be quick because we all want to hear our professors. My focus is to verify whether cooperative identity can be qualified as a legal category in Brazilian legal system. So that is my focus, Brazilian legal system. But this is no simple task. We are here we have a challenge because it involves constant economic investigation and kind of Sisyphean work, trabalho de Sísifo. Because when we are almost reaching the goal, everything starts all over again. So the first observation, and I will put some notes here, just one moment. I suppose everybody can see this. And just one moment. Yes. Okay.
If you put it in terms of show the slides, maybe it's better. Gustavo.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay.
Okay. So the first observation is that Brazilian law does not use the term identity as a qualifying term for this type of organization. Identity derives from the concurrent compliance with the 7 principles of cooperativism enunciated by International Cooperative Alliance, ICA, in the Declaration of Cooperative Identity, which Professor Antonio Fici from Italy claims it's his words, persuasive source of cooperative legislation. Therefore, Brazilian cooperativism, including through the joint guidance of OCB, and the ICA, must be built on principles inherent to this organization type. So this is the first parameter, our principles. The second parameter for investigation is our federal constitution. We elevated the Cooperative Act, o Ato Cooperativo, to the status of a constitutional rule, both through programmatic rule of support and encouragement of cooperativism, as we can see in Article 174, second paragraph in our Constitution. É preceito programático, como dizemos aqui, it's a programmatic rule, and by determining, even after our recent tax reform, appropriate tax treatment for Cooperative Act. So we can find it in Article 146, 3C, and Article 154A, 6th paragraph 3. It is necessary to note that that the materialization of cooperativity, to use Professor Rui Namorado's rhetorical figure, frames the specific core of practice of Brazilian cooperativism in the line with Latin America model. So we come to the third parameter. And the third parameter is linked to the Cooperative Act. A third parameter could be the understanding that the cooperative is a special enterprise with an organization that operates at costs for the benefit of cooperative members. It exists, the cooperative exists for the cooperative member and to provide them with services. However, formally, under Brazilian law, we cannot speak of a corporate or a business system because the cooperative has remained distanced from entrepreneurial activity. That's somehow different in some parts of Europe, and Professor Henrÿ can explain that for us. Here, we are bound by the Cooperative Act, which, as I said, is the fatispecie, as we say in Italy, of this Latin American cooperativism. para os colegas brasileiros, nós formalmente não somos empresários, apesar de economicamente termos uma empresa especial. Therefore, despite being an idiosyncratic special enterprise, we cannot use this parameter exclusively in Brazil to explain the cooperative identity. It is relevant and shows evidence of activity, the act of cooperative, or act of cooperativism. But it's not exclusive, and at times, as I'm used to say, it generates the metonymy of the cooperative act. So, a metonímia do ato cooperativo, because we cannot simply explain the whole by the part that integrates it. Just one word, some words in Portuguese. Nós temos um grande problema, porque nós usamos o ato cooperativo para tudo, mas ele não explica a totalidade da cooperativa. Então, isso nos gera uma metonímia, a parte pelo todo, né? The cooperativism wants to be diverse in relation to the corporate system, including tax purposes, even after our tax reform, as I said, and also for crisis purposes, which must take organizational peculiarities into account. We have a serious problem here in Brazil, because we don't have any specific legislation for our crisis, for the crisis of cooperatives. So one important note is, the only time the term identity may be elevated to the normative text is in the project of Bill 815 from 2022, which deals with cooperative reorganization and whose rules and aims to preserve cooperative identity as the objective of the law itself, preventing the reorganization process from serving to distort, to mischaracterize the model. I must say that this project is inspired in the guidelines of Professor Henrÿ, in your book, Professor Henrÿ. This brings us to the fourth parameter. Is identity contained in the cooperative object? No. The answer is no. The cooperative object in our legislation is the economic scope of the cooperative itself, carried out through cooperative action. Conventional business activities have evolved to understand activities as a whole. Now we are here bounded to the Cooperative Act. Therefore, business dealings between the cooperative and the member, and between the member and the cooperative, demarcate the mutualistic implementation of the cooperative purpose. Sometimes, fulfilling the cooperative purpose and providing services generates agency conflicts and property risks, exposing cooperative members, which is very well pointed by the Observatório de Cooperativismo, led by Professor David. My fifth attempt is to analyze the functional concept of social interest. It's a functional concept here that we have in business law, when we see societies like Sociedade Limitada, like Sociedade Anônima. This social interest, can we use it to explain the identity? What is the purpose of the cooperative? That's the question. It concerns organizations of interest to the cooperative community, implementing common goals and extracting economic and social benefits for the cooperative members and those affected by cooperative activity. The power of this organization arises from the collective nature of cooperative members and the dual status of user and owner, as said by Professor Valmor Frank our father of our legislation, forming a structural hierarchy of service provision to optimize costs and increase bargaining power in the exchange relationships. The cooperative member surrenders part of his individuality to become a collaborative part of the whole. Cooperation cannot be achieved without reciprocal support, especially for formation of scale economy. Creating a cooperative means shaping a service for the benefit of the cooperative community. Doing business under a cooperative regime means operating at cost price with increased expenses, returning the operational surplus. Therefore, the coordination of cooperative activities ultimately focused on the economy of the cooperative community is mediated by this organization of this fact, or the organization of all factors under the personified legal form of a cooperative society. A cooperative organization must be understood in all its dimensions of business intermediation on behalf of its members. So this is why the cooperative conducts business directly with his members, but also conducts business for its members, providing them with services that enable economies of scale and mutual propagation of economic benefits. So the last legislative parameter to identify is what we call the characteristics of cooperatives, which are set forth in Article 1094 of our Civil Code and Article 4 of our cooperative law. Are these the cooperative identity in Brazil? Indeed, they should be understood as parameters for preserving the economic function of the model and its identity, the identity itself. These characteristics are not to be confused with the identity, but rather guarantee and forms its framework. In other words, they ensure that the peculiarities of the production model are met. Having established these parameters and legal categories, is the concept of cooperative identity autonomous in Brazilian legislation? That's the main question. The answer is yes. And we can use it to defend our model. We can use it for interpretation. That's the main reason to understand cooperative identity when we have to interpret our legislation. So the answer is yes. And the solution is that we have the sum of all these previous points that are shown for everybody. The cooperative enterprise terminology used here to denote a special enterprise distinct from traditional business corporations is an idiosyncratic production model that is predisposed to seek economy of scope and scale based on contributions of the entire community of members who will receive and service the community will receive a service provided by the society. Therefore, this peculiar type of hierarchical economic activity within a mutually recognized enterprise allows gains and benefits directly to the assets of cooperative members. There's no doubt that this is a productive system of transformation or organized service provision quite characteristic of a company in the economic sense, but diverse. We have a diverse identity. Cooperativism provides a resilient and distributive income model, including a sustainable production model for the challenges of our time. I would like to conclude with Professor Henrý's words in his guidelines. Ecological and sustainability balance can be more easily achieved in structures such as cooperatives because they lack the need to maximize results or provide returns on investments. Therefore, they can focus on cooperative members, users, neutralizing the whole of capital as the primary objective and fostering intergenerational solidarity. The development of the model takes place within the limits of identity and frames a true principle of preserving order and systemic coherence. So it has an interpretation whole, given that legislation must always be drafted, interpreted, and applied with respect for these unique values, such as solidarity, democracy, and collaboration, which have great significance within this economic model of production. There's also the potential to combine social environmental sustainability concerns with the productive efficiency. Based on this premise of an organization with identity, it allows us to understand risks and cooperative activity and to be a resilient leader in the modern development process by complying the cooperative identity. So it's a way in the darkness. That's my words. I would like to thank everybody and also apologize for eventual mistakes of my parts. Thank you very much, Professor Davi.
Thank you, Gustavo. I'm sure that I make my notes here, so after I can make my questions, because I have some, but following, I would like to invite, and of course, to say many thank you, Professor Cracogna, because you accept this invite, and I'm sure that you have many knowledge to divide, to compartilhate with us. Please feel free. Thank you again.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Davi. I hope you hear me properly and that you can see my PowerPoint as well. Is that correct?
Not yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Now?
Nope.
Well, so in that case, I will recourse to your help to help me with the PowerPoint, please.
Okay. Or please, Ricardo, can you
lend me a hand?
The slides? 1 minute. Okay, let's go.
Okay. Bueno, entonces empezaremos. En primer lugar, mis disculpas porque hablaré en español. No para facilitarle a ustedes la comprensión, sino para facilitarme a mí la expresión. Pero ustedes sabrán disculparme. En primer lugar, mi agradecimiento al profesor Davi por esta generosa invitación para compartir con ustedes algunas ideas acerca de este interesantísimo tema de la identidad cooperativa desde el punto de vista jurídico. En segundo lugar, expresar mi satisfacción por compartir este panel con los distinguidos profesores Gustavo, Saad, Diniz y Hagen, Henrÿ, quienes enriquecen ciertamente esta jornada. Y a continuación, entonces, voy a comenzar, por favor, la siguiente placa. Voy a comenzar citando una expresión que le da contexto al tema que estamos considerando. Cuando se cumplían 100 años de la primera ley de cooperativas del mundo, que fue la Industrial and Provident Societies Act de Inglaterra de 1852, el doctor Laszlo Balko escribió un artículo publicado en la Revista de la Cooperación Internacional en el que decía textualmente lo que está transcrito en esta placa. Me interesa destacar la última parte. La cooperativa de Rosedale suministró la organización económica de la empresa cooperativa, pero esta necesitaba imperiosamente una regulación legal apropiada. Esta última frase que está allí destacada creo que sintetiza un reclamo que tiene todavía vigencia en muchos lugares, el de contar con una regulación legal apropiada para las cooperativas. Y ya veremos que se trata de una regulación apropiada porque la cooperativa es un sujeto muy peculiar. La siguiente, por favor. ¿Qué vamos a ver entonces sintéticamente en esta presentación? En primer lugar, una breve referencia a la cooperativa y el mundo jurídico. Y a continuación, los dos enfoques que entiendo son conducentes a caracterizar a la cooperativa desde el punto de vista jurídico. Un enfoque estructural acerca de la forma jurídica cooperativa y un enfoque operativo o dinámico acerca de la actuación de la cooperativa. Y finalmente, algunas conclusiones. Siguiente, por favor. Decimos que nosotros vivimos en un mundo de normas jurídicas, aunque no estemos estrictamente apercibidos o conscientes de ello, nos desenvolvemos permanentemente en un ambiente de normas jurídicas que de alguna manera regulan todas las actividades humanas. Las regulan sea obligando, prohibiendo, facultando o permitiendo conductas, pero todas las conductas están regidas por el derecho, aunque están regidas por defecto, es decir, por no tener una norma específica que se refiere a ellas, con lo cual están implícitamente siendo permitidas por el derecho, pero no hay ninguna actividad humana que pueda escapar a este mundo de las normas jurídicas, y las cooperativas no son una excepción. Por eso nos interesa conocer este tema de la identidad cooperativa desde el punto de vista jurídico, porque ellas están también sujetas a las normas jurídicas que las regulan y que les dan su perfil propio. Siguiente. Las cooperativas, como decía Balko en esta cita que hemos transcrito al comienzo, las cooperativas nacieron espontáneamente, es decir, no fueron un producto de la actividad del legislador. Nacieron por la voluntad libre y creadora de un grupo de personas que quisieron resolver sus problemas mediante su propio esfuerzo y a través de la organización. Pero estas cooperativas, así nacidas para resolver muy diversas necesidades en distintos países del mundo, fueron posteriormente objeto de una definición de los principios que las regían. Vale decir que se llegó a un consenso universal acerca de cuáles son las características propias de las cooperativas. Esto es lo que se denominan principios cooperativos, que constituyen la llamada doctrina cooperativa. Y esta doctrina cooperativa constituye una suerte de fuente del derecho, es decir, una inspiración, una guía, una orientación, una motivación para que el legislador dicte las normas que regulan a estas entidades. Y este conjunto de principios fue enunciado de una manera formal, digamos así, por la Alianza Cooperativa Internacional como organización representativa del movimiento cooperativo mundial. Fueron enunciados en el año 1937 y tuvieron inicialmente escasa repercusión legislativa. Pero en una reformulación que se hizo años después, en 1966, el enunciado de los principios se convirtió en una fuente de inspiración mucho más influyente sobre los legisladores. Y finalmente, en 1995, cuando la Alianza Cooperativa Internacional celebró el congreso de su centenario, en esa oportunidad se aprobó una declaración sobre la identidad cooperativa que contiene los principios cooperativos, además de una definición de cooperativa y de los valores de estas entidades, que obtuvo una notable recepción legal. Si observamos la influencia de los principios cooperativos desde el 95 hacia acá, vamos a encontrar que está muy desarrollada en la legislación cooperativa de los distintos países del mundo. Veamos la siguiente, por favor. Esta influencia se nota en las distintas legislaciones en una intensidad diversa, pero hay algunas que incluso los reproducen textualmente. Y no solo están presentes en muchas legislaciones, sino que hay organismos internacionales que los han incorporado en documentos fundamentales que estos organismos aprobaron, como por ejemplo la resolución 56/114 de la Asamblea General de las Naciones Unidas, que contiene una referencia explícita a los principios cooperativos tal como están enunciados en la Declaración sobre la Identidad Cooperativa. Y más aún, la Recomendación 193 de la Organización Internacional del Trabajo reproduce esta Declaración sobre la Identidad Cooperativa en su propio texto, como un anexo, de manera que hay un documento que Hagen Henrÿ lo ha destacado como un documento importante del derecho cooperativo internacional público que recoge los principios cooperativos, de manera que ya han alcanzado un grado de sanción y de vigencia que se ha universalizado y se manifiesta en las leyes, no solo nacionales, como recordamos, sino también en las leyes uniformes que se han dictado en distintas regiones y continentes, y las leyes modelo sobre cooperativas que se han aprobado en distintas partes del mundo. Esto muestra la universalización, la globalización que ha alcanzado la expresión de la identidad cooperativa proyectada sobre la legislación. Siguiente, por favor. Ahora veamos cómo se manifiesta esta presencia de la identidad cooperativa en el aspecto estructural de las cooperativas. Si consideramos a la cooperativa como un sujeto de derecho, es decir, como una organización jurídicamente reconocida, vemos que este sujeto de derecho es materia de una definición que hace la Alianza Cooperativa Internacional en su declaración sobre la identidad cooperativa, en la cual caracteriza a estas entidades diciendo que una cooperativa es una asociación de personas voluntariamente unidas para satisfacer necesidades y aspiraciones comunes, mediante una empresa de propiedad común democráticamente gobernada. Si analizamos esta definición, encontramos claramente establecidos dos elementos componentes fundamentales. Por un lado, una asociación de personas, este es el lado humanista de la cooperativa, y una empresa económica de propiedad común de ese grupo de personas que sirve al efecto de satisfacer esas necesidades a través de una gestión democrática. De manera que la cooperativa es un sujeto de derecho de una naturaleza compleja, donde coexisten elementos de la asociación y de la empresa. La cooperativa no es una u otra cosa exclusivamente, es una síntesis de ambas. Por eso su complejidad supera y va más allá de lo que ocurre con las otras personas jurídicas o sujetos de derecho que normalmente están encasillados como una asociación o como una empresa en forma diferenciada, pero no como una síntesis de ambas. Sigamos, por favor. ¿Qué consecuencias trae esta naturaleza de la cooperativa así caracterizada en su definición? En primer lugar, que la cooperativa es diferente de las sociedades y de las asociaciones. No es ni una ni otra cosa, pero tiene características de ambas. Vale decir que se trata de una coexistencia armónica de dos elementos diferentes, pero conjugados dentro de una misma unidad jurídica. Y esto trae como consecuencia analizar cuáles serán las disposiciones supletoriamente aplicables a las cooperativas, es decir, aquellas que no están destinadas específicamente a ellas, pero que se les aplican por el carácter general de la legislación. Y ahí es donde hay que determinar en qué medidas son o no compatibles con dicha naturaleza para hacerles aplicables. Seguimos, por favor. Quiero hacer una breve referencia a la Ley de Cooperativas Brasileña 5764 del año 71, porque en su artículo 4 contiene algunas referencias que son sustanciales en esta materia y conducentes a explicitar esta naturaleza que hemos caracterizado. Dice el artículo que las cooperativas son sociedades de personas. Fíjense que destaca ese elemento personalista. No aparece aquí la referencia al capital o a otros aspectos, sino a las personas. Y agrega, con forma y naturaleza jurídica propias. Esto es sustancial. Lo que la ley brasileña ha concentrado en esta escueta fórmula es fundamental para caracterizar a la cooperativa. Tienen una forma y una naturaleza jurídica que les son propias, es decir, no les pone la camisa de una sociedad comercial, de una asociación civil, es algo diferente, porque tiene una naturaleza propia. Y luego sigue destacando, y esto es importante para los efectos de la aplicación supletoria de normas, la naturaleza civil y termina diciendo que se distinguen de otras sociedades por las siguientes características. Y ahí enuncia en sucesivos incisos los principios cooperativos. Ahí el legislador ha incluido, después de este encabezamiento que dice que son las cooperativas entidades de naturaleza jurídica propia, cómo se caracterizan y cuáles son esos rasgos, los principios cooperativos que en la segunda parte menciona este artículo 4 de la ley cooperativa brasileña. Sigamos, por favor. En cuanto al aspecto operativo, es decir, la cooperativa ya es un sujeto de derecho, pero ese sujeto de derecho tiene que operar, tiene que actuar, tiene que relacionarse con otros sujetos de derecho, tiene que convivir en un mundo de relaciones jurídicas. Y aquí entonces viene este aspecto dinámico de la regulación de las cooperativas. Y aquí hay que hacer referencia, como mencionaba el profesor Saad Diniz, al acto cooperativo, que vale recordar, la ley brasileña de 1971 es la primera que en el continente acoge específicamente la noción de acto cooperativo, como veremos en el artículo 79. Pero esto no quiere decir que la ley cree el acto cooperativo. La ley no lo crea. El acto cooperativo existe porque es una realidad de la actividad, de la dinámica operativa de la cooperativa. Lo que hace la ley es reconocerlo y regularlo y establecer sus efectos. Entonces, este acto cooperativo constituye una manifestación típica de la actividad cooperativa. Por eso es propio de ellas. No, otra entidad no puede hacer acto cooperativo porque su naturaleza no le permite hacer esta forma de actuación. Porque el acto cooperativo tiene sujetos propios, la cooperativa y sus asociados, o las cooperativas entre sí, y tiene un objeto que es el específico de la actividad de la cooperativa de que se trate, sea el consumo, la comercialización agraria, la atención de la salud, la provisión del crédito, etc. Y una causa que le da sentido a esa actividad, que es el servicio sin fin de lucro. Esto es la causa propia definitoria de la naturaleza cooperativa, a diferencia de lo que ocurre con otras entidades jurídicas que hacen la misma actividad, tienen el mismo objeto, pero con una causa diferente, la causa de lucro o la causa de beneficencia. Aquí, en cambio, está la causa del servicio sin fin de lucro. Sigamos, por favor. Esto se refleja en el mencionado artículo 79 de la ley brasileña, cuando define a los actos cooperativos como los realizados entre las cooperativas y sus miembros, entre los miembros y las cooperativas entre sí, para el logro de sus objetivos sociales. Y agregan un parágrafo único que el acto cooperativo no implica operación de mercado ni contrato de compraventa de producto o mercancía. Esto ayuda a perfilar y delimitar el acto cooperativo, diferenciándolo de otras formas contractuales de actuación. Siguiente, por favor. ¿Qué consecuencias tiene esta caracterización del acto cooperativo? Es, en primer lugar, lo diferencia de otras figuras contractuales. Esto es claro. Hay una noción de acto cooperativo que es singular, propia, diferenciada. Y, consiguientemente, se rige el acto cooperativo por el derecho cooperativo específicamente, es decir, por la legislación propia de la materia cooperativa, por las normas administrativas y por el estatuto de la cooperativa, como así también por la jurisprudencia y la doctrina específica. Y solamente en forma supletoria se le aplican disposiciones de la legislación sobre figuras afines, pero siempre y cuando esa legislación sea compatible con la naturaleza de la cooperativa. De esa manera tiene el acto cooperativo su regulación jurídica propia. Pero repito, el acto cooperativo existe aunque la ley de cooperativas no lo reconociera, porque el acto cooperativo tiene esa naturaleza que es pre-jurídica o pre-legal. Ahora, el legislador lo que hace es reconocerlo para permitir perfilarlo de una manera más precisa y deslindar la aplicación de otras formas de otras normas que no son adecuadas a esa naturaleza. Bien, pasemos a la siguiente, que para felicidad de ustedes verán que dice conclusión, de manera que ya pueden sentirse anticipadamente felices de que esto está por terminar. La historia del derecho cooperativo consiste en una permanente búsqueda de afianzar la singularidad de las cooperativas. Si ustedes miran, bueno, en primer lugar, recuerden la cita que hicimos al comienzo. Hace mucho tiempo que se viene buscando la manera apropiada de regular a la cooperativa. Y ese es un esfuerzo tal vez difícilmente concluido, porque siempre hay aspectos que tienen que ser perfeccionados para lograr que esa regulación jurídica se amolde de una manera plástica y adecuada a esa naturaleza diferente. En general, los legisladores no reconocen esta naturaleza diferente o la conocen limitadamente. Y lo mismo le pasa a los jueces. Los jueces no tienen la versación especializada para reconocer la naturaleza cooperativa. Por eso es tan importante la labor de la doctrina, la labor de la academia, la labor de los profesores, de los estudiosos, que alimentan permanentemente con su producción el conocimiento jurídico de las cooperativas para permitir el perfeccionamiento de su regulación. Pero no solo de la legislación, sino también las normativas que aplican los funcionarios administrativos y, por otra parte, las disposiciones propias de la jurisprudencia cuando aplica la ley de cooperativas. Esto es algo que compromete el esfuerzo permanente de los juristas. Y reconocer que ese adecuado tratamiento jurídico de las cooperativas es una condición relevante para permitir su desarrollo. Si las cooperativas no están adecuadamente reguladas, es posible que existan, y de hecho existen, pero no tienen todas las condiciones necesarias para desarrollarse adecuadamente. La legislación es el andarivel que les permite a las cooperativas desarrollarse idóneamente conforme con su propia naturaleza. Por eso es permanente, sobre todo en los últimos años, el reclamo, la recomendación de los organismos internacionales acerca del adecuado tratamiento jurídico de las cooperativas. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Professor Dante. Thank you for sharing with us your knowledge. Then now we start with Professor Hagen. Again, thank you for accepting this invite, and please feel free to show and to share with us your knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me properly?
Yes.
Yes.
So, quite contrary, Dante, to what you just said, I'm not at all happy that you finished. First of all, it's a pleasure to listen to you as always, and I want to express my thanks because you're one of those rare persons who put me on the track of cooperative law, and I learned over the decades a lot from you. So good afternoon, good evening to all of you. I'm Hagen Henrÿ, that was mentioned many times, and I'm happy to share with you a few ideas on the subject of international law and the cooperative identity, and then some examples from Europe. And of course, before I do that, I would like to thank the organizers, and especially you, David, for the kind invitation. We met once before. You reminded me of that in Berlin a couple of years ago. I did not remember you by name, but when I saw your face on screen now, yes, the memory came back. So I'm very happy to be allowed to be with you. So I will take you out to a field to which both Dante and also Gustavo alluded to already, to the international dimension, let's say, of cooperative law, which is a bit my obsession. So the objective of my presentation is threefold. First, to demonstrate that all lawmakers have a legal obligation to respect the principle of sustainable development. And second, to demonstrate that cooperative lawmakers have a legal obligation to derive cooperative law from the cooperative principles as enshrined in the ICA statement. And then third, to discuss some of the features of cooperative laws in Europe whose alignment on the cooperative principles is at times questionable. For the purpose of this presentation, I use the term cooperative principles instead of that of cooperative identity to signify the interrelation between the definition of cooperatives, the 6 values on which they are based, and the 7 principles as enshrined in the ICA statement. That is, the 4th element of the cooperative identity, the ethical values in which the members believe is excluded from this understanding. Now, what is the legal basis of the obligation of lawmakers to respect the principle of sustainable development? With its recognition of sustainable development in 1997 as a concept of public international law, the International Court of Justice has introduced sustainable development into the world of binding law. In its recent advisory opinion on the obligations of states in respect of climate change, July this year, the International Court of Justice is reportedly of the opinion that, and I quote, given its continuous and uncontested universal recognition, the principle of sustainable development guides the interpretation of certain treaties and the determination of rules of customary international law. Therefore, the objection to sustainable development being a binding principle of public international law is no more tenable. In its decision, the International Court of Justice states that, and I quote, sustainable development concerns the need to reconcile economic development with the protection of the environment. The relevant literature seems to agree on a notion that uses different denominations for these aspects, respectively economic security and natural resources or biosphere, and it adds 2 more aspects, namely social justice and political stability. The notion of sustainable development reveals a radically new approach to development. And 4 interrelated shifts indicate that. First, a paradigm shift from universality to diversity, that is, from difference to alterity, in order to preserve the source of development, hence sustainable development, which is diversity. Diversity has 2 aspects, a biological one and a cultural one. Without respecting the cultural diversity, biological diversity may be protected, but its capacity to regenerate cannot be preserved. And without cultural diversity, global social justice cannot be had. Second, a shift from a national, supranational, and international approach to development to one that includes also the global aspect, since one of the aspects of sustainable development, namely the biosphere, is global. That makes each aspect and sustainable development in its totality a global issue. Third, a shift from a compartmentalizing approach to a holistic one where social justice, economic security, the biosphere, and political stability are aspects, not elements, of development. Fourth, a shift of emphasis in the assessment of development where social justice is central. Without social justice, no political stability. Without political stability, no economic security. And without economic security, there is no concern for the biosphere. Mechanisms to regenerate social justice are therefore the key to the pursuit of sustainable development. In the democratic structure of cooperatives, which is to ensure that cooperatives address also the social needs, the social aspect of the needs of the members, is one such mechanism. And I shall come back to that in a while. Now, what is the legal basis, or what are the legal basis of the obligation of cooperatives, lawmakers, to derive cooperative law from the cooperative principles? To be noted that the argument is not to say that the cooperative principles create legal obligations for lawmakers. What possibly creates the obligation of cooperative lawmakers to derive cooperative law from the cooperative principles are sources of law that create such an obligation because they relate to the cooperative principles. 7 such sources may be considered. Number 1, the fact that some 3 million cooperatives around the world and the members identify with the cooperative principles. Number 2, the 1995 ICA statement on the cooperative identity. Number 3, the fact that laws on cooperatives include, Dante has spoken about that, include or refer to cooperative principles. Number 4, the promotion of cooperatives recommendation 193 of the International Labour Organization. Number 5, the Articles of Association of the ICA. Number 6, Article 22, which talks about 22, of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which talks about the freedom of association in connection with the legal principle of the prohibition of contradictory behavior. And finally, number 7, the legal principle of equal treatment. Now, I will not talk about those bases where there are some doubts, and I will only talk about those where I at least have no doubts that they create a legal obligation for lawmakers to derive cooperative law from the cooperative principles. And these are the Articles of Association of the ICA, Article 22 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the principle of equal treatment. The Articles of Association of the International Cooperative Alliance first. Appendix A to the Articles of Association of the ICA contains the text of the ICA statement. According to Article 12, Section 2 of these Articles of Association, the text of the ICA statement is legally binding on the ICA and its members. The Articles of Association of the ICA are legally binding as the ICA is an association registered under Belgian law. Now, the substance of the obligation stemming from Article 12, Section 2 of the Articles of Association of the ICA varies with the type of addressee. And those are the ICA itself, of course, the members, and the members come in different forms. Some are cooperatives, some are associations, and some are public entities. In addition to their individual and quite different obligations, all addressees share the obligation to employ their efforts to ensure that the cooperative law of the state where they are registered is aligned on the cooperative principles. Now let us look at Article 22 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. This international covenant is an international convention in the sense of Article 38 of the Statute of the International Court of Justice. Hence, it is a source of public international law. The principle of the prohibition of contradictory behavior, which we have to read in connection with this Article 22, is a general principle of law recognized by civilized nations, which is also the source of public international law according to Article 38 of the Statute of the International Court of Justice. The reason to opine that states have a legal obligation to derive cooperative law from the cooperative principles based on Article 22 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights in connection with the legal principle of the prohibition of contradictory behavior is as follows. If a state does not allow an entity registered under its law to join the ICA as a member, it contravenes Article 22, freedom of association. If it does allow it to do so, and if this entity is a cooperative, then the state must allow this cooperative to comply with its obligations stemming from Article 12, Section 2 of the Articles of Association of the ICA. If it does not allow this, it violates the legal principle of the prohibition of contradictory behavior. Consequently, cooperative law of that state must either be aligned on the cooperative principles, or it must exempt those cooperatives from the application of the cooperative law, at least to the extent necessary for them to be able to comply with the obligations stemming from Article 12, Section 2 of the Articles of Association of the ICA. In this latter case, the cooperative sector of that state will, however, split into two: cooperatives that comply with the cooperative principles and cooperatives which do not. Now, the last source of the obligation of lawmakers to derive cooperative law from the cooperative principle is the principle of equal treatment. The principle of equal treatment is one of the general principles of law recognized by civilized nations, quote and unquote, according to Article 38 of the Statute of the International Court of Justice. While other enterprise types than cooperatives are treated by lawmakers according to their objectives and forms, often cooperatives are not. Many jurisdictions companize cooperatives, that is, they approximate their features with those of capitalistic companies, so-called companization, and or they neglect the enterprise aspect of the character of cooperatives, socialization, and or they make the governance structures of all forms of enterprises, cooperative enterprises included, converge on the lines of capitalistic companies, convergence. This occurs not necessarily only through laws on cooperatives, but through cooperative law in the broader sense. Now, what are the consequences, if there is such an obligation for lawmakers? What are the consequences for the lawmaker? And I deal in this part, first of all, with the relationship between democratic structure of cooperatives and social justice, and then with some challenges the lawmaker will face when putting this obligation into practice. Despite the democratic structure of cooperatives and social justice first, despite the gradual generalization of the legal, corporate, social, and societal obligations of all enterprises, as well as the emergence of social and solidarity economy actors, cooperatives continue to distinguish by what they potentially contribute to social justice and hence to sustainable development, as they have a legal obligation to keep their objective and form in line with the cooperative principles. Indeed, according to the definition of cooperatives, which is an element of the cooperative principles, the objective of cooperatives is, and I quote from the ICA statement, the objective of cooperatives is to meet the common economic, social, and cultural needs of the members. The means to do that is an enterprise jointly owned and democratically controlled by the members. The form of this enterprise is further specified by the other elements of the cooperative principles. Insofar, the elements of the cooperative principles, the definition of cooperatives, the cooperative values, and the principles condense in a meta-principle, the principle of democratic member participation, including control. Democratic member participation means the equal say of all members in the decisions on what to do, how to operate, and how to distribute the ensuing result, independently of their financial contributions. When elaborating, amending, or implementing a cooperative law that allows and compels cooperatives to regenerate social justice, the lawmaker must find answers to the following questions: how to overcome sociological and economic barriers to making the meta-principle of democratic member participation a reality for the sake of social justice. Number two, what does deriving cooperative law from the cooperative principles and respect for the principle of sustainable development mean? Number three, how to transit from the cooperative principles and the principle of sustainable development to law? And number four, does cooperative law require a special notion of law? Putting the meta principle of democratic member participation into practice, the lawmaker will meet a number of interrelated sociological and economic barriers, which may be summarized as the control risk in cooperatives, that is, the risk of members losing control. It is a risk, not a feature of cooperatives. This risk materializes when there is a considerable information, knowledge, and/or know-how gap between the various stakeholders within the cooperative, that is, the members, the General Assembly, the delegates, if any, the surveillance committee, if any, the board, especially where not all board members are members of the cooperative, the administration, management, especially where managers are not themselves members of the cooperative, and the employees. Of the main factors that cause this control risk to materialize, I mentioned the radical structural changes of cooperative enterprises, as well as the de-organization of all types of enterprises. As compared to the model underlying most cooperative laws, and which is that of the Rochdale Equitable Pioneers, cooperatives have become more complex as concerns the membership, the stakeholders whose interests they have to take into account, their activities, the beneficiaries of these activities, and the modes of participation. As concerns the de-organization of all enterprises, cooperatives included, this is caused by their integrating ever more intensively and organizationally into global value chains composed of different enterprise types, which are subject to different national and/or regional laws, and/or by their becoming part of ephemeral, amorphic networks of actors. The factors of globalization, that is, digitization, digitalization, and the technical means to transfer data quasi-instantaneously, make enterprises mutate from organized collectives to contractual connectives. It is unclear how the meta-principle of member democratic participation can operate in global value chains and in non-organized networks of actors. We do not know how this will impact cooperatives in their role as levers of social justice regenerators, and we have no answer to the question whether the core of the cooperative idea, which is solidarity, can only regenerate through organized collectives, or whether it can also regenerate through connectives, and whether, in the latter case, this would require a new type of law. Now, let me come to the last question, whether we need a special notion of law when we talk about cooperative law. I think this question, whether cooperative law requires a special notion of law, can be subdivided into two. First, the concept of social justice and law in the context of sustainable development, and then the notion of law, the very notion of law for cooperative law. As mentioned, the notion of development carried by the legal principle of sustainable development signals a radical new approach to development, which is indicated by several shifts. Among these shifts is the one toward including, besides the national, regional, and international approach to development, also a global one, and a shift from universality to diversity. In a world of many cultures, this implies considering all of the cultures, where and when they meet, because perceptions and conceptions of social justice vary with them and crystallize in the culture-specific legal principles, rules, and practices, that is, in law. Nowadays, different cultures meet everywhere and all the time. The term we use for that is interculture. For example, they meet in cross-border transactions, in cooperatives whose members identify with different cultures, in the mentioned global value chains, and they meet increasingly in cyberspace. the common core of all legal traditions is their function as a means to pursue justice in all aspects, including social justice. However, the answer to the question, what is law and what is its content, is not a universal one. It filters through a triple culture-specific continuous process, one that determines to what extent facts have power over norms, one that distinguishes norms from policies, and one that distinguishes law from other norms. The outcome of these processes is not static, and it will show, by all probability, a diversity of laws in which, as said, a diversity of conceptions of social justice crystallize. The global approach to development and the change from universality to diversity for the sake of sustainable development require therefore changing the concept of countries' laws, forming a mosaic of independent legal systems where the conflict of their norms is solved by applying only one law, toward a concept that allows interweaving and articulating legal traditions without diluting their differences in an assumed superiority of any legal tradition over the others. It will be the task of lawyers to find ways for which the ubiquitous interculture with its various internormativities will find what I call an interjuridique, where laws come together without diluting in one type of law. As for the notion of law for cooperative law, for several reasons, cooperative law might need a new notion of law. One of these reasons lies in the notion of sustainable development having overcome the divide between the natural sciences and humanities, but having created a new divide. The factors of globalization cause a friction between phenomena which remain conditioned by time and space, biological life, and those which do not, most elements of the economic life. For cooperative lawmakers, this is particularly relevant. Cooperatives are both, as we heard already several times, are both associations whose physical members have a biological life conditioned by time and space, and enterprises, economic organizations that are increasingly driven by data and less by capital and labor. The capturing, processing, transfer, and use of data is not conditioned by time and space. While the associate aspects of cooperatives must continue being regulated by law, the enterprise aspect might increasingly be regulated by algorithms. The effects of this friction on the very notion of cooperative law requires further research. Furthermore, the associative aspect of the character of cooperatives requires that the tendency towards contractualizing the relationships between the various stakeholders within the cooperative and that between the cooperative and the stakeholders be reversed. Finally, if law is a means to regenerate social justice, then the individualistic notion of law as it currently dominates the legal discourse may no longer serve its purpose, as it does not allow for the legal principle of solidarity, a universal legal principle according to Article 38 of the Statute of the International Court of Justice, to apply. Without solidarity, social justice remains deficient. The legal principle of solidarity expresses in the acceptance and fulfillment of two interdependent obligations without a legally protected expectation of a return. One concerns the regeneration of social justice as one of the three aspects of the objective of cooperatives. The other obligation concerns addressing the central aspect of the whole, solidum, which is global social justice. This latter obligation is part of the idea that all beings are inevitably interconnected and dependent on each other and on nature. This double dependency is the fundamental reason behind a possibly emerging human right to sustainable development. And I come now to the last part, which is cooperative principles and laws on cooperatives in Europe. And I'll be rather brief on that one. Now, I will only discuss laws on cooperatives, but not the wider concept of cooperative law in Europe. Now, while not all European countries have a special law on cooperatives, exceptions are Denmark, the Republic of Ireland, and Switzerland. In all of them, cooperatives are regulated by special rules. In the member states of the European Union, the Council regulation of 2003 on the statute for a European cooperative society applies in addition to the national laws. Mainly because of its irrelevance, cooperatives registered in one EU member state may have members and activities in any of the EU member states, and because of its complex interrelationship with national cooperative law, as well as its minimum capital requirement of 30,000 euros, this regulation has been only rarely used to establish a European cooperative society. And for this reason, I shall not further deal with it here. The special laws on cooperatives in Europe are highly diverse from a formal and from a substantive point of view. The formal diversity of European laws on cooperatives stems from the approach to having one general law regulating all types of cooperatives. That is the case in Austria, Germany, and Malta. Having several sectoral laws or laws for specific types of membership. Examples are Greece and the Russian Federation. Having a combination thereof, example is France, or having, in addition to a general national cooperative law, several general regional laws. That is the example is Spain. A special case is the United Kingdom, where the law leaves it to the regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority, to decide which entities are to be recognized as cooperatives. But interestingly, this Financial Conduct Authority issued guidelines how to deal with that. And in the guidelines, they refer to the ICA statement, the content of the ICA statement, saying that only those cooperatives which abide by those principles of the ICA will be recognized as bona fide cooperatives, that is, cooperatives that can be registered as such by the authorities. Now let us look at the substantive diversity, and also with a question mark behind many of these issues as far as the compliance with the principles is concerned. The substantive diversity is due to a number of questions to which the laws on cooperatives in Europe found different answers, such as, for example, to what degree should the associate character of cooperatives be recognized? Finland and the Netherlands, for example, allow for a single person to set up a cooperative. So the associate, by definition, the associate character is not there. Another question, what should be the scope of the autonomy granted to cooperatives to regulate their affairs through their bylaws? That is, the number and substance of the default rules varies greatly. And again, Finland is, in that sense, an extreme example. It is full of default rules, the law itself, and it allows even to deviate through the bylaws from the objective of cooperatives. That is, through the bylaws, you could have, as a cooperative, an objective of having commercial to produce, to generate commercial gains. Another question, which is a divisive factor, whether cooperatives may engage in any lawful activity or not. There are still a number of restrictions where cooperatives are excluded from being active in insurance and banking, for example, energy provision in some countries, and also in some countries certain professions may not be exercised in the form of a cooperative. And that is, of course, in violation of paragraph 1 of the ILO recommendation 193, which allows cooperatives to be active in any activity. Whether or not cooperatives may pursue other interests than those of the members, for example, the interests of non-members, exclusively of the community or those of the general public. So you see that we have a deviation from the very definition of cooperatives, which emphasizes the definition of the ICA, which emphasizes that the cooperatives should pursue the satisfaction of the needs of the members and nobody else. Should cooperatives be allowed to have non-member business, and if so, unlimited or limited, and according to which criteria? Should non-users be allowed to invest in cooperatives? This is a hot potato, as you certainly know, not only in Europe, but across the world. Should non-users be allowed to invest in cooperatives? The German, Italian, Portuguese, and the law of the United Kingdom do allow this. Other countries' laws are not clear on the subject. The question then is, which rights should these non-user members have? At times, also the law limits the amount of the investment non-users may have individually or cumulatively, and or the amount of the capital they may hold in proportion to the member share capital, and or it limits their voting power and or the number of seats they may have on the board. So you hear that we have non-user investors who in some cases have a seat or even several seats, can have several seats on the board. They can have voting power limited so far to questions which relate to their investment. Another question is whether general governance structure, so the board of directors, general assembly, and possibly a delegates assembly, should be complemented with a supervisory council or body. That is the case in some countries. Whether non-members may be members of the board. The laws of Belgium, Italy, and Netherlands, Norway, Poland, the Russian Federation, Spain, and Switzerland do allow this. However, the laws of Italy, Switzerland, and Spain stipulate that these non-members may not form the majority on the board. Another question still, whether plural voting rights may be granted in primary cooperatives or not. Where they are granted, they are often limited, for example, as to the membership type. Example, Poland allows for plural voting rights only in cooperatives consisting of legal persons. Portugal allows for up to 3 voting rights in cooperatives with less than 50 members and up to 5 in cooperatives with a larger membership. Most countries allow for plural voting rights, but limit the total number of plural voting rights in proportion to the total amount of the voting rights. Germany limits the exercise of plural voting rights to certain less important decisions, that is, mainly to those which do not require a qualified majority. So dissolution, for example, cannot be there, you cannot use your plural voting rights. No country seems to allow for the attribution of plural voting rights exclusively on the basis of capital contribution. But some do allow a mix, so where you can have a mix of basing the plural voting rights on the capital contribution plus on other issues. Still another question, whether to require minimum capital. Most regional cooperative laws in Spain do require that. They're required to have a minimum capital of 3,000 euros. Most other laws do not exclude such requirement to be included in the bylaws. Some countries, such as Germany and Norway, have an indirect influence on the question, as they require a pre-registration feasibility check where the question of sufficient funds is relevant. Whether to require the setting up of a reserve fund. Most countries do, exceptions are Belgium, Norway, and the United Kingdom, but the devolution of the remainder after liquidation is unclear, at least it varies. Whether to make a distinction between dividends and patronage refunds, that is not always clear, in part because of the income taxation of cooperatives varies from country to country. Whether cooperative-specific audit should be required. Cooperative-specific audit is rare nowadays in Europe, in violation, I would say, of paragraph 6 C of the ILO recommendation 1 and 3. And the last question, whether and to which end the government should promote the setting up of higher level cooperative organizations in the sense of the 6th ICA principle. The laws of Italy and Spain do require that. In conclusion, as alluded to already, any research into the compliance of the cooperative laws in Europe would have to broaden its scope to include, besides the laws on cooperatives, other elements of the notion of cooperative law, in order to more fully understand the factors that cause phenomena such as the companization and the socialization and convergence, and to assess why and to what extent they hinder compliance with the cooperative law, whether they hinder compliance of the cooperative lawmaker with the legal obligation to derive cooperative law from the cooperative principles. Thank you for your patience. I'm sure I went over the allotted time, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hagen. Thank you to share with us this a lot of knowledge, as I said before. So now we have only 5 minutes, but so if somebody wants to make a question or comments, please feel free. Please, because I have my notes, so I'm sure that after I will send emails for Professor Dante, Professor Gustavo, and Professor Hagen. So I open this opportunity for you. If you want to make a question, please feel free. Is there somebody? Just hang your hand and then make a question. No? Okay, Gustavo, please.
I have one note. I'm sharing with everybody. We recently have an important decision in Brazil dealing with the Cooperative Act. And it's important because it's a kind of protection of cooperative community in reorganizations process. So we have a recent legislation that changed our insolvency law, and all cooperative acts, so acts between cooperative and cooperative members and cooperatives are protected. So you cannot negotiate or renegotiate a cooperative act inside a reorganization process. So it's a protection for the cooperative community, because a cooperative member that wants to renegotiate his debts with the cooperative somehow will put this renegotiation in all the community. And our federal court, STJ, pronounced this decision that is very, very important. And somehow we can identify cooperative identity in this protection. So it's a suggestion of lecture for you, that for persons that are not from this law world, this particular world, so you can see how we are dealing, how we are fighting to preserve cooperative identity in our system. So it's a suggestion for you.
Okay, thank you. So maybe if Professor Dante, Professor Hagen, Professor Gustavo, if you have some words now, because I think we can heard this and say finish. So, Professor Gustavo, some words?
I just want to thank you very much, Professor David, for this opportunity, and I'm really, really honored to share this opportunity with Professor Henrÿ, Professor Dante Cracogna. For me, it's an honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Professor Dante? I can't hear you. Maybe you should turn on your microphone. Nope. Not yet. Maybe we can move on to Professor Hagen, then we come back to Professor Dante. Professor Hagen.
Well, just to thank you again for this invitation. It was a pleasure, and I apologize. Probably I'm the cause for not having time now to discuss. It's difficult for me to cut it down to 20 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever it is. Probably too obsessed or enthusiastic about the subject. So my apologies again.
No problem. Thank you for sharing with us your point of view. I will send you a message because I have many points here that's very important in terms of governance, in particular, member democratic participation and the control. I think it's a point for us that's very important. So thank you. Professor Dante?
Still muted.
Yeah.
Davi, você não consegue ativar daí?
Não creio. Gustavo.
No.
Ricardo também. We can do it in remotely. So, okay, so in this way, thank you, Professor Dante. Maybe we can talk more in another situation. Thank you for everyone for stay here. Then we can talk in another situation. So see you guys. Have a nice weekend. Thank
Same
you.
to you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. See you.
See you sometime.